Okay, chapter 3.4, round decimals. Okay, rounding decimals works pretty well. It's similar to, not all that much different than rounding regular numbers. So let's review really quickly what it looks like to round other numbers. Say we have 3,420. Let's choose, say 3,451. Okay, now we know that when we round decimals, we either round up or down, and we know that 5 is that magic number. The number 5 tells us to round up. If it's bigger than 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, then we round up. If it's smaller than 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, then we round down. Okay? That's something you've learned before, and you know that 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Notice that there are the same number of digits for rounding up as there are for rounding down. 0 counts. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits for rounding down, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits for rounding up, counting the 5. Okay, so a lot of times what will happen is we'll round a number. Say this one, we might round to the tens place. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. This is 3,451. So this is rounding to the tens place. So what we do here is we look at the underlying digit and we look next to it to see if it's big. And since it's not, we leave the 5 alone and it just stays put. So 3,450 is what we would do, rounding this out. And we add this 0. Okay, this is important. We add this 0 because if we didn't, it would just be 345, and that wouldn't make any sense. Okay, now if I were rounding to the hundreds place instead, and then I would decide whether or not the next number is big enough to make it round up, and it is in this case. It's a 5, so we round up. So instead of rounding to 3,400, we're going to round to 3,500, but we put 2 zeros in to hold our place. If we didn't, it would just be 35, and that wouldn't make much sense. It needs to be 3,500. Okay, so really what we're doing is rounding to the hundreds place. Is this number closer to 3,400 or 3,500? Okay, and we look over here, and this 55 tells us that it's right in the middle, or it's closer to rounding up to 500. Okay. Now, if we were just rounding to the thousands place, that would be, change back to blue, or some kind of blue. If we were rounding to the thousands place, then we would just look here. We would look over here at this 4, which isn't big. Is this number closer to 3,000 or is it closer to 4,000? Where is it at? Is it closer to 3,000 or is it closer to 4,000? And it's only 451, and that's not in the middle. The middle between 0 and 1,000 is 500. We're only at 451, so it rounds down. So this would round down to just 3,000. We could say, oh, well, there's about $3,000 in my savings account. That's a lot of money, I know. It'd be nice to have that much in my account. $3,451 rounds down to 3,000. Now, if you wanted it to sound better, you could round to the hundreds place. And those two, if you round it to the hundredths place, instead of using these numbers, you'd say, well, is it closer to 3,400 or is it closer to 3,500? Okay, and it's 451, and that 5 is that next number over that tells us to round up to this one, so it would be closer to 3,500. So if you wanted to make your savings account sound good, you could round to the hundreds and say that I have about $3,500 in my savings account. It depends on where you round, what kind of an answer you're going to have. Sometimes you want to round down, and sometimes you want to round up. If you're buying enough paint to paint your bedroom, you want to round up on the amount of square feet that you need to paint. And you'd want to maybe round up on the number of gallons that you wanted to buy. If you round down on either of those things, then you could end up in the middle finishing the job and having to go back to the store to get more paint. and that might not work so well. So sometimes you want to round up, sometimes you want to round down. So that's that. Let's look at a couple more things. They've got a little frog here, and the frog is tiny. It's the smallest frog in North America, and it is only 0. So we're going to talk about decimals now. 0.437, which again is 0 and 437 thousandths. That's how you'd write that. 437, and it's in the tenths, hundredths, thousandths place. So it's 437 thousandths of an inch. Okay? It would take 1,000 of these little pieces to make a whole inch, and it's less than 500 of them. It's less than half of an inch, if that helps you understand what that looks like. It takes 1,000 of these little tiny pieces to make a whole inch, and there are 437 thousandths. So not very close to 1,000. And we'd have to take 1,000. If we had 1,000, it would look like this. See, that looks like 1,000. That's 1,000 thousandths, or it's just 1. Kind of crazy, but that's how that goes. So the frog is 437 thousandths of an inch. Okay. If we round this frog to the nearest hundredth of an inch, that's right here. Round it to the nearest hundredth, we would get 0.44. We're going to round it up because we're looking over here at this next number, and the next number is big. So this is not 44. Oh, okay, this is no longer in thousandths. If we're rounding it to the nearest hundredth, it's in hundredths, and that means that we don't. And this is the big difference between rounding numbers that are bigger than 1, or bigger than the decimal, the rounding numbers that are smaller than 1, the decimal sized numbers. We don't add the 0. If we add a 0, it looks like we're still using thousandths. But we're not using thousandths. We don't have 440 thousandths. We have 437 thousandths. So when we round up, we want to leave that off. We don't add a 0 there. We just call it, it's about, this little symbol looks like an equal sign, but it means about. It's approximately, it's almost 44 hundredths. 0.44 is 44 hundredths. Okay. Now if we were to round it instead to the tenths place, that would be 0.4, and we look over at the 3. The 3 is not big, so we wouldn't round that 4 up to a 5. We just leave it a 4, 0.4. So it's about 4 tenths. So about 4 tenths, similar to 4 tenths. These are equal. They are read the same way. 0.4 is 4 tenths. Less than 1, less than 1/2. So it depends on what we round it to. Okay. That's how that works. And so we're going to do some rounding, and you have to remember that you do not add a 0 to the end when you're rounding, because then it looks like you're still in whatever number you were at before. And you're rounding it to the nearest hundredth, then you stop at the hundredths, and you don't put any more decimal places in. When you round it to the tenths, you stop there, and you don't put any more decimal places in. I've got something going on here. Let's erase that. Okay. I don't really think there's a whole lot more that you need to do. You just have to look at it. Sometimes they'll just tell you to round to the digit that's underlined. So they could give you something like 0.809, and they'll underline the hundredths place. Then that's the place that you round to. So you're going to rewrite it as 0.8, and then you have to decide whether this number stays a 0 or goes up to a 1. And you look over at the 9 to decide. Well, the 9 is big, so we're going to go up to 1. So 809 thousandths is about the same as 81 hundredths. Does that make sense? There you go. If they had rounded it to here, you're just going to look at the 0. You're going to ignore the 9 completely. You would just look at the 0, and you would say, well, that's about 8 tenths, because it doesn't round up. The 0 doesn't make it round up. You can't look over at that 9. You can only look as far as one more place over. And you don't add those extra place values. 8 tenths is all you get. So that's the biggest thing that you need to watch out for, is that a lot of times kids will want to add that place value, add those zeros back in. And you do that with whole numbers, but you don't do that with decimals. It doesn't work out very well. Okay. Now's a good place for you to stop watching the video. Every time I stop drawing pictures, you guys, call me out on it, tell me I'm bad. So I'm going to draw another picture, but you're welcome to not continue watching because I understand that sometimes these pictures get a little crazy and weird. So we're going to draw something I used to like to draw when I was a kid. I don't think I can do it as well as I could when I was a kid. I used to draw mushrooms. And I don't know, I think I liked watching the Smurfs, and the Smurfs were about the size of a mushroom or something. I don't know, but here's a mushroom. I think I drew them better when I was a kid. Lots of color, and of course, when you draw with on a computer, it's not as easy as drawing on paper. I can tell you that. My drawings here at home, I draw all the time, and they turn out fantastic. But sometimes it's one on the computer I'm a little less than happy with. So this is a giant mushroom. And this is what I would look like if I were a Smurf. You know what? If I were a Smurf, I wouldn't be brown. I'd be blue. Alright, so we're going to, this is me with my big old eyes and my nose and my happy face, my blue eyebrows. What's kind of cool is that it's kind of fun being blue. It's not easy being green, but it's kind of fun being blue. I agree, or at least I think. You might disagree. There's my blue self, and I'm on my way to visit my friend. His name is Frank. He's a little guy. He's really small, much smaller than a Smurf, and he lives inside that mushroom. And I'm coming over to say hello. He's not going to invite me in for dinner because I'm like a giant. I'm just like huge. Anyway, have a nice day.